Hello, I'm Mick Foley right here on the Sarah O'Connell Show. Bang, bang!
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Mick Foley, welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. How are you today?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Looking forward to this event tonight right here in, where are we?
We're in Bristol.
We're in Bristol. So I'm doing good though, thank you.
Fantastic. Was it a good flight over and stuff?
Yeah. Just flight from New York to London is not really any more difficult than New York to like Los Angeles. You know, I've been off, Australia. You know, once you've gone to Australia, everything else is a piece of cake. Yeah, so it was pretty easy.
It's very true. Now, is it 12 hours to Australia from America? Because it's 24 from here.
You know, I just know I count from the time I leave my door at home to the time I get to my hotel, and it's about 35 hours. So.
Wow.
I believe I went to China, which is about 14, and there's like a 5 or 6 hour layover, and then it's like another 10 or 11. So it's as far around the world away as you can possibly get.
It really is.
So.
I want to go all the way back. So you were on the same high school wrestling team as Kevin James, the actor.
That's true.
And your paths diverged quite a lot. He became a mall cop.
Yeah, he became a mall cop. I guess a highly paid mall cop, though. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they had him to come back for a second shift once, which is fantastic.
Well, let's not use the words mall cop part 2 and fantastic in the same sentence. Although Mall Cop, the first one, was a very good movie. Yeah.
But he did come back and he did get paid for it.
He gets paid. Yeah, people just ask who's done better in their career, me or Kevin. I'm like, hey, I would trade in everything I have for that syndication package that he has for King of Queens. He's done it amazingly well, and he just has done a great job, and not just in the sitcom, but the movie world. Now he's back in the sitcom world, so he's done extraordinarily well.
It's all down to his wrestling training.
Wrestling training did not hurt, yeah. I think that made men out of both of us down in the Ward Melville. It was hot down there, the Ward Melville wrestling room. It was it was hot. I'd grown up, my dad was the athletic director, so I'd been able to go down there from the time I was a child, and I knew that, man, those wrestlers were tough, and it's a brutal, when I say brutal, I mean physically taxing, but also very thankless. And I think it really molds people. Amateur wrestling, I think, does a great job of molding boys into men. Was
it what you expected wrestling to start with? Because you kind of know when you're watching it that it hurts. Like you know it's going to hurt, but does it hurt more than you think it will hurt? What's it like?
Are you talking about professional wrestling?
Yeah, it's all professional wrestling. It's all the same.
Yeah, it hurt far worse than I imagined it would. My first time in a wrestling ring, I helped set it up because a small promotion had come to my old high school where my dad was the athletic director, and so just like on a whim, I threw my head against a turnbuckle and fell backwards onto that canvas and the ring that we all know is just bouncy and springy. Yeah. It wasn't bouncy or springy. Yeah, it really rattled my head. I didn't know anything about tucking my chin to my chest, and so literally every single thing that I did hurt far worse than I had ever imagined it. And it's funny coming from a guy who came to be known for taking a lot of pain, but I was not prepared for how physical it was going to be.
And how do you sort of knowing that? Because, with any job, there's some days you kind of don't feel quite in the mood to do it. But when you know you're going to go through a sort of physical ordeal like that, not just athletically, but also that you might come out of the match feeling worse than when you went into it, how do you get the motivation to actually turn up?
Well, I was watching 5'2", the Lady Gaga documentary today.
Very good.
It's really good. And I literally, you can mark this day down. This is the first time. Well, I know I have listened to the Star is Born soundtrack in the car, but I was so impressed by that documentary that wow, I'm gonna fire that up. Yeah, it was really good stuff. But I'd say, you prepare in the same way that she would for that Super Bowl. You need to get into that zone. And if you are, like I was, kind of a shy kid, you have to find a way of transforming yourself before you walk out that curtain. Because if you don't, you know, that's bad news. You know, if you can't find a way to get into that character, at a certain point you can say you've done it long enough. That's like riding a bicycle, but it's certainly not that way when you start. And I'm going to correct myself, because if anything, when I did my comeback matches with WWE in 2004 through like 2008, and even the matches I did with TNA, I was really nervous about those matches, far more nervous than I used to be during the course of my main career.
Really?
Yeah, that's true. It's an exclusive for you.
It is. Do you have, or did you have like a pre-match ritual?
Well, you know, there were certain big matches where I'd listen to Tori Amos music.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's true. But I didn't listen to music very often, and only Tori for maybe the really big ones, the ones where they were being harmed, not injured, but harmed in some way was almost a certainty. I tried to visualize, you know, when I was Mankind, the character Mankind, which was a new and darker character to me. I did spend quite a bit of my first few months in WWE in the boiler room getting prepared for matches, until it did become like riding a bike, and then I got the hang of it and got into the swing of it. But yeah, I was big on visualizing.
So when you say you visualize, did you visualize every single beat of a match, or just like the sort of big, you know, going through a table, that kind of stuff?
I visualized moments. So if I had 4 or 5 really good moments, I could build a match around them. And that's what I thought about, trying to make impressions on people with certain moments. So I would approach a match, especially if if it was a pay-per-view match where I knew who my opponent was. I would try to come up with a few moments that would create lasting impressions, and then try to make a match happen around those.
Say you were considering getting thrown through a table or something like that, and that wasn't towards the end of the match, would you have to plan different scenarios just in case you couldn't do increasingly violent things after that? Like if you accidentally got injured or anything, or do you just have to hope that everything goes to plan and you can get through it and do all the other stuff you planned as well?
Well, part of being a good pro is to always have a plan B that you can create on the fly. So there was a situation like in 1994 with some type of wild brawl with me and Max Payne against the Nasty Boys, where Jerry Sags was going to pile drive me on a table, but the table broke. Yeah. A lot of weight, you know, 600 pounds or so on there. The table broke, and the plan B was involved me getting knocked off backwards off the. It had the kind of, I don't know, a walkway. There's always, I don't know, but there's probably a technical name. That was one of the hallmarks of the WCW pay-per-views. They had this long wooden walkway, and so I got knocked off backwards. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, then I see knobs with a steel shovel. So plan A was the pile driver through the table. Plan B was cracking 3 ribs and getting hit with a shovel in the face.
Ouch.
Yes, definitely.
I've been to parties like that. It's not good.
You have, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
So speaking of WCW, of course, now with WWE Network, we can go back and revisit all this great stuff. And there's, of course, classic matches you're known for, but which ones sort of stand out to you? Would you recommend people go and revisit or watch for the first time?
Oh, the Beach Blast '92 with me and Sting was a really good match, and there was a submit or surrender match. The only time I wore a white T-shirt with Sting's likeness, and I like it very mature, like blacked out his teeth in it, put devil's horns on it. But it was just a TV match. It wasn't a pay-per-view, but it was extremely good. And I pulled off a strength move. I caught Sting coming off. It was coming off the second rope, not the top rope. Yeah. Caught him coming off. Sting was he was a big guy, about 250. Yeah. Caught him coming off the second rope, spun him in midair, and dropped him in Eddie Gilbert hot shot over the top rope, and I watched that. I was like, where the heck did that come from, and what made me think that I could pull that off? But those were two really good matches, and I think anything that I did on television, teaming up with Abdullah the Butcher, is really worth watching, because there was never any, people want to talk about wrestling being pre-planned or choreographed. None of that applied when Abdullah the Butcher was in the ring. So it may have been controlled mayhem, but it was still mayhem. And sometimes it wasn't controlled, but they were wild matches. And there was a sense that the good guy wasn't just trying to get a pinfall, but they were fighting for their lives out there with Abdullah, and I think that's a really cool aspect that we brought. He brought it everywhere he went around the world, but as a tag team, we brought that too.
You told a story that when people would go to different cities, they had to record promos. I'm in New York, I'm in Cincinnati, all that kind of thing, whereas you would record 50 different promos for every single thing, and one of them was a song that you performed. Yeah. Do you still remember that?
Yeah, I do. And I'll give you another exclusive. I'll do a second song that I did not cover. This was a few of my favorite things. Beautiful Julie Andrews, Sound of Music, right? Although Rod Stewart and hundreds of others have covered it, but in my heart, it's a Julie Andrews song, and I just turned it around in Cactus Jack fashion. Went steel chairs and trash cans and hard wooden tables, landing on concrete as long as I'm able, dropping an elbow on poor helpless thing. These are a few of my favorite things, and that was a promo. And so one night, we used to wrestle on Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day. Or night. Those were always big events, because people have had a holiday and they're looking to go out. Same reason that those 2 days are big for cinema. And so we were wrestling, me and Abdullah against Van Hammer and I believe Johnny B. Bad. Yeah. And I just took the We Three Kings of Orient R and just turned it into Cactus Jack and Abdullah might make Van Hammer a horrible sight at the Omni in Atlanta all on Christmas night. Oh, and I don't know if I had any more. But yeah, I like doing things that were different. And my feeling was, if I wasn't bored, if I was emotionally invested, then the fans would be watching it as well.
Absolutely, and I love that you still remember that stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Some of it still stands out in my head, and I've recorded, literally thousands of those market-specific promos, and here and there. Vince Russo, actually, it was his idea to have me sing. Me and Goldust had this creepy vibe when we teamed up in '96, and we were never really a team on the air on television. There's no television angle, but we teamed up throughout the fall of '96, largely against The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, and I did something where I referred to him as Mommy, and Vince Russo and Vince McMahon really liked it, so we would gear our market-specific promos in a really creepy fashion, and Mankind just started singing, "Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? Just like me, they long to be close to you." And then he would give me a kiss and tell me what a great job I had done. Oh my boy, it was good. It was a lot of fun.
So do you think most of Mankind's trauma stemmed from the fact they wanted to be a musician?
That was originally with there was that storyline that never really went anywhere. It was just that's what I get this idea. It was given an idea. They had a mask for me. It didn't even turn out to be even look anything like the Mankind mask. It was more like a Leo DiCaprio Man in the Iron Mask prototype, which just wasn't feasible. You couldn't wear a metal mask on a nightly basis.
Once a week at most.
Yeah, once for parties. Maybe I could have broken one out for a big pay-per-view match.
Yeah, right. Can't lift your head up.
But we just made the best of that situation, and I remember being in Japan, finishing up my tours, and I was heavily influenced by the music of Tori Amos, and I was reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and so I was all right. Here's very much the the monster that society created, and so I came up with this idea that he had been a musician at one time,
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it never went anywhere, but originally that was the idea. And the only 2 fingers of the 10 that weren't shattered were his mandible claw fingers. Yeah, that was the background.
Wow. Because was there a suggestion or an idea at one point that you might be called Mason the Mutilator?
Oh yeah, but I don't like to. I don't like to talk about that. Actually, yeah, that was supposed to be my name, and that's why you always have a plan B.
Yeah.
And I also tell people, you know, you need to be diplomatic. You can't tell Mr. McMahon that's the worst thing you've ever heard, although he does like frankness.
Yeah.
But I was literally the first time I'd ever met him, you know, had been just a few weeks earlier. And so when he sprung that name on me, I said, I like it. I like it a lot. But what if we called him Mankind the Mutilator?
Right.
And he just was taking down notes. And I came out the day after WrestleMania for my debut, and I was just Mankind. No Mutilator, no Mason. It was really it was nice to know that he had taken just about every one of my suggestions, and you know, we worked it into the character.
That's great. It all paid off. I've heard before that you sort of credit seeing Superfly Jimmy Snuka jumping off that cage, doing the big body splash as your inspiration for getting into wrestling. And then, of course, all those years later, you would jump off the top of the Hell in the Cell. Would you say that because of that initial spark of inspiration, your dramatic leap was almost inevitable?
You know, we actually thought the dramatic leap, art imitating life or life imitating art, one or the other, was when I came off the top of the cage against Triple H at SummerSlam '97. Actually, I came off one rung from the top because I got up there and realized I can't stand up, I can't balance up here, and so it was one rung, and I was like, that was it. That was like the, you know, culmination of that dream. And so yeah, little did I know that less than a year later, you know, we'd be topping that, you know.
And did The Undertaker have a broken foot?
Yeah, he sure did. Yeah, he sure did. Yeah.
Was that before he went into the match? Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know what caused it, but there's a scene, for those of you who go back and take a look, after I go through the cell. Now he's got to find a way to get down there, so he hangs. He's suspended several feet, and when he lands, he's in obvious pain, you know. So he continued with the match. First of all, he entered the match with an injury that most people would not have thought of working on, and then he endured that drop, and you know, and he had to baby feed me, you know, bottle feed me, because I was a little less than 100% after going through that cell. So it was a tremendous, it was an incredible performance on his part.
And you've had some other you've had lots of extreme matches, but ones that stick out to me were you fighting Randy Orton and Edge at WrestleMania 22, was it? Is there one in particular that you're like, wow, I've not only had a match, I feel like I've survived something? Apart from this brutal interview that we're having right now, of course.
On both those occasions, yeah, I felt like I'd survived something and done something really important. Yeah. We had great matches, and they elevated the guys I was working with while elevating me, and that's like the best case scenario. So I really felt for Edge. Well, I felt for Randy with all those tacks in his back in 2004, but 2 years later I came back and wrestled Edge, and at least I had the luxury of just like laying in my hotel the whole next day and catching like a 4 p.m. flight, and I make it home and I'm watching Raw. The poor guy had to wrestle again. You know, he'd just gone through a flaming table. You know, he had no eyelashes; they'd been burned off, and he's got to go out there and do it again.
Fake eyelashes on. I
don't know what he did, but yeah, I definitely had the feeling that I had endured and survived something.
Oh yeah. Now I love your stand-up comedy. Is that something you're still doing?
Well, I did I think 46 shows on this last tour, 20 Years of Hell tour. WWE came and scouted the show, ended up coming back 20 years to the day of the famous Cell match, and it was in Pittsburgh, and they caught it on film. And I haven't watched it. You know, I know. I felt
so good.
I felt like it was a really good show. I don't want to go back and prove myself wrong, but I felt like use a baseball analogy, which is not, it doesn't work as well over here. But
We've not been invited to the World Series yet. I don't know why. America wins every time.
If I say that, that's right. It's not really a World Series. There's one team from Canada and a bunch of teams from the States. But I felt like I knocked it out of the park, you know, with that show. And tonight I'll have a lot of fun tonight. This is more of it's a more casual journey. You know, I don't know where it will go. But there's a lot of fun to be had there, and then sometimes you come up with, you know, you're asked a question, it jogs a memory, and you end up telling a story that may make it onto a later stage show. Oh, wow. You know, there's a great, I don't know, Billy Kirkwood from Insane Championship Wrestling, but one night I was doing, you know, one of the tours in Scotland, and I was asked a question about the Buried Alive match with me and The Undertaker in October '96. And I kind of went off on a little, you know, tangent, and I came back, and Billy was like, "That's a story." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You work on it, it's a story. You got great lines there." And so every night, then I would go out. That's the difference, really, between, you know, those shows and what I'll do tonight. It's you know, you do it and you enjoy the moment, and you hope that everyone else enjoys it. When you get out there and you're working on a show, you can kind of take things that work and try to make them better. You find out what doesn't work and you eliminate it, and I love that process of trying to make a show as good as it can be.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of shows, I also loved your Mick Foley series. Lots of fun, 10 episodes, I think. So any chance of any more of that? How's Noelle doing? Still following the career in wrestling? What's going on? No,
Noelle is not pursuing wrestling anymore. She was in the emergency room, I think, on 3 different occasions, twice in the just in the filming of that show, and then one other time when she dislocated her knee. So unfortunately, her body was not going to hold up to that. You know, the women are just phenomenal now, and physically, she wouldn't be able to, you know, hang with those incredible athletes. Right. We did enjoy the show. You know, it went for 10 episodes. I think if it had been on USA or E, it would probably be in its 3rd season by now. Yeah. But WWE really took a gamble on it. They made it like the, you know, centerpiece of the network for a while, and but it was an expensive show to make. You know, it was. Well, yeah, I mean, it was 2 camera crews. You know, 16-hour shooting days.
It's like this.
Yeah, it's exactly like this.
There's hundreds of people behind that camera.
And yeah, they had the entire basement was just filled with production equipment. So it was a great 10-week adventure. But we just did the 1 season. You
debuted, I guess, in the 80s, early 90s. You're wrestling, all that kind of thing. If you were to debut in 2018, do you think you still would have developed into the same kind of character or characters? Would you have had pyro and dry ice and all that stuff? What do you think you would have been like today?
Well, I don't think I would get the choice about getting pyro, and I don't think that's your selection. You know, I never had it. I'm proud of the fact that I never had a cool entrance.
It's your music, though.
Oh, well, the latter day peppy Jim Johnston wreck was really good. You know, there was a difficult period when Mankind had become a babyface or a good guy, but he still had really dreary bad guy music. Yeah. It's hard because so much of the appeal is that initial pop, you know, from that music. Yeah. Whether it's Austin's glass breaking, those first couple chords of the DX music, the gong and the Undertaker's music, and then when you come out and your music, it makes it tough to try to compete pop wise. Yeah. And I think there is this idea that the louder the initial pop, the more over the wrestler is, and that's not always true.
I think sometimes the theme music can exist on its own too. Like Kurt Angle, whether he's good or bad, is always going to be told he sucks. And good music can carry someone. Yeah, it can really help in the process. I had a chance to hang out with WWE's current guy. We were both at the Nita Strauss show. And I'd never met him before, but this is the guy who could come up with you know, Asuka's music, right? And
Nakamura's music and Becky's music, like anyone, the Shield music. And I said, geez, the highest praise I could give you is like, it's not like anyone she said, hey, this WWE music has really dropped off, you know. I mean, Jim Johnston should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, in my opinion. He made such an amazing contribution, and the new team's doing an incredible job as well.
You really are. You are, of course, a 2-time New York Times best-selling author.
Number one.
Number one. Yeah.
I've hit the list 5 times, but I've been number 1 twice.
That's very good.
Thank you.
Press. Do you think you've got more books in you, more stories to tell?
Well, I did a little Christmas memoir last year. I donated all the proceeds to children's charities, and it wasn't that generous because the book didn't sell that well. But I knew that going in. You're writing for a very small part of the marketplace, the people who like my my Christmas fascination. And look, I'm going to be honest, the sales of Countdown to Lockdown would indicate to me that the world has had their share of memoirs. But the nice thing is, if I have stories, I actually enjoy, again, I was saying, like on a show like this evening's, you tell a story and it's out there, it's you work on shows, you work on your stories when you're out on the road on your shows. The nice thing about a spoken word story is that you can work on it, and then I can take stories that are already written, even if they're common knowledge, and then you rewrite them for the stage and you work on them every night. And sometimes it's just, people think it's foolish when you're like, I should have stressed that syllable a little stronger. But sometimes it's just like knowing there's a reaction there and just working your hardest to try to get it. So if I have more stories to tell, I'll tell them on the stage instead of the page.
Absolutely. And there's a level of interactiveness that you don't get, obviously, when you're writing it, and you get a live feedback.
Yeah. And that live feedback is as close as you get to being in the ring. And the difference is, unless it's a really bad night out there, you don't end up in the emergency room.
That's always a relief.
Yeah, it is.
If you were to create a stable with anyone, past or present, who would be in it with you?
Past or present?
Yeah.
Past or present? I don't know. That's kind of difficult to say. I think if you had a stable of Bruiser Brody, Abdullah the Butcher, Terry Funk, and me, maybe Terry Gordy thrown in, that would be an impressive group of wild men. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. I don't know what we'd call them, but I think there'd be some good promos to be had, and very much a non-PG type of stable. Yeah, absolutely.
Would you consider managing anybody?
Yeah, I would actually. Yeah, I certainly would if the right occasion came up. Yeah, I would. There was an idea thrown at me about 1.5 years ago, and believe it or not, Becky Lynch, when she was struggling there, when she was just kind of, she was so frustrated. Yeah. She had an idea, for me to come in and like be her mentor on air, and fortunately for her, that wasn't necessary and probably wouldn't have been wise. Although I would say the idea, like Becky turning on me, that would, I believe, I believe, even as a beloved character in WWE, I believe the fans would love her even more if she turned on her, the grizzled veteran.
I think she can't do any wrong at the moment. She could just turn on everyone. I think everyone's going to cheer it.
It's the best, It's like reliving the Austin era again. Yeah, I say I'm super high on Becky Lynch, and I go back. I'm not shy about pointing out the Facebook post I put out 15 months ago saying the best is yet to come for Becky Lynch. I just felt like, given the chance and the right angle, that she would take off, and she proved me right.
I think it's time for a women's main event at WrestleMania now.
I do. Yeah, I do, and we may. Who knows? We may see that this year. It's been great here. There's a huge box of items that I've got to start signing. We got to do. Thank you for taking a train 3 hours. That means 6 hours round trip.
Pretty much. It would have been about a 20-hour walk, so it wasn't that bad in comparison.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you've got a large audience, and I hope they enjoyed it. And as long as I'm here, I might as well get a plug-in for Al Snow's collar and elbow. It's not often I'm going to praise Al Snow in a public forum, but he makes a nice clothing line. Designer
fashion. Well, Mick Foley, thank you so much for your time. You're an absolute legend, and it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for everybody watching at home. Be sure to share, subscribe, give this video a big thumbs up, and I'll see you all again soon for another episode of The Sarah O'Connell Show. Bye.
Yeah.